Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this press conference on the transparency of third country interest representation. My name is Yasmina Yakimova, and I'm joined by the Rapporteur Adina Vălean from EPP Romania. We will have interpretation today in English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Romanian, so you could use the headphones as well. I'll give the floor first to the Rapporteur, and then after we can take some questions online and in the room. So thank you. I can start.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I would like to start by explaining what this directive is, what it does, and why it matters. The purpose is straightforward. When someone is paid by a non-EU government or state-linked organization to influence EU policymaking, that activity should be visible. Circulation of ideas is part of a democracy. The question is simply who represents which interests. This directive provides that clarity. Across the EU today, the situation is fragmented. Some member states have transparency registers, some have voluntary ones, some have none, and others are considering rules that would go in very different directions. For organizations acting across borders, this means inconsistent obligations and duplicated work. For citizens, it means that understanding who is acting on behalf of whom depends on which country you look at. And for politicians, it creates guesswork in meetings. Who is this actor and who is behind his position? This directive removes this fragmentation and replaces it with a single EU-level standard, same activity, transparency anywhere in the Union. What the directive actually delivers is simple. It creates a single European transparency interface that connects all national and regional registers. For the first time, we will be able to see in one place which entities across Europe are providing interest representation services for a third country sponsor. One Europe, one transparency window. The information required is limited to what any professional actor already has at hand: the identity of the entity, the identity of the sponsor, the policy areas concerned, or the financial amount involved. This keeps the reporting burden low. We want to achieve transparency and not create loads of paperwork. The scope is deliberately precise. This directive applies only to actors who are paid by a third country sponsor to influence policy making. It does not cover NGOs acting on their mission, media, journalists, diplomatic activity, academic work, or legal professions. And it does not label or stigmatize anyone. If an organization receives foreign funding for its own work, such as promoting education, social inclusion, or human rights, it does not need to register. But if it is paid by a foreign government to advocate on a specific legislative file in a EU country, then for that activity it needs to register. The same rule applies to organizations such as cultural institutes directly conducting lobbying for a third country. We also build strong safeguards into the system. In sensitive cases, data may be kept non-public when justified. The supervisory authority must include fundamental rights expertise to ensure that no decision puts anyone at risk. What happens if you do not apply? Sanctions. Sanctions are administrative and proportionate, linked only to this directive, and applied gradually: warning, reprimand, and a fine, with suspension reserved for serious and repeated breaches. This keeps enforcement credible but fair, because transparency must never become a weapon. In short, this directive brings clarity to a small but important area of policy making, meaning lobbying that is paid for by non-EU public actors. It does not judge the content of the advocacy. It simply ensures that the origin is visible It does not interfere with legitimate activities. It sets a shared baseline so that political interactions happen on equal footing. Influence is not the problem, but unclear influence is a problem. So I rest here and I'm taking questions from you if you want.
Thank you, Ms. Valean. Of course, you can ask questions in the room and online. And I forgot to mention that the debate is this afternoon and the vote is happening tomorrow. So go ahead, Max.
Max Griera for Politico Europe. Two questions. On the one hand, at the very beginning, the proposal sent by the Commission was not liked by the shadows and by the rapporteur. How have you managed to bring everyone together? S&D, Greens, they were very critical. Do you expect their support? How does the text sort of like placate concerns that since it's a directive, right, each member state could transpose it any way they want, and perhaps countries like Hungary and Slovakia could use it to target certain NGOs or other organizations? And voila, if you expect to have a centrist majority on this file, Greens, S&D, Renew and EPP. Thank you.
Thank you, Max, for your questions. Indeed, initially I said, and all the shadow rapporteurs, we asked the Commission to take the proposal back because we felt that it was too rushed in to produce it. We thought, and it was true, that it had a lot of unclarities in the scope, it went too far with bureaucratic requirements in what kind of paper an entity, an organization needs to keep and for how long. And so it was burdensome, we considered it, too intrusive, unclear in scope and who applies to. And then we thought, because this is an IMCO committee, this is internal market committee, not jury, we thought initially that it would be best if the Commission will take the proposal back and bring it with more clarity and simplification. After the Commission decided not to take it back, even if we requested, I chose the idea of trying to work on it. So that's why it was a lot of work. Not only myself, but all the shadows rapporteurs were very much involved. We spoke with organizations, we spoke with representatives of member states, we investigated best practices the way they are around in Europe, how the situation is, how is one country or another tackling this transparency exercise. So a lot of work, and I do believe that we managed in the end to propose a text which is very much simpler to be understood, a text which is not burdensome in requirements, a text which brings minimum harmonization and brings safeguards so that this cannot be weaponized against one entity or another. And also to protect those entities who are paid for lobbying on behalf of third countries, which are, let's say, in one moment or another under the spotlights of geopolitical turmoil, in order not to create a pressure on their activity. And that's why we introduced this idea that some data might not be made public. You register, but you can request also not to have this public. It was difficult to bring people on board, but I would say, if we look in the committee vote, that we had a majority, a comfortable one. I was trying to take on board all the requirements, meaning I started from the opinion that everyone wants to have a good product and everyone wants to have transparency, because transparency is not ideological. So I didn't want to use the work on this directive to point finger to a political group or another. I tried to bring everyone on board, and I think I succeeded in a satisfactory way. So I expect that since I have seen there are no many amendments, and those who are put forward for the plenary, well, they are not acceptable because they are challenging exactly the legal base of this proposal, so they are not acceptable. But I would say that I hope that this majority will, which supported in the committee, will support it also in the plenary vote. And yes, you asked also about the possible target of some, let's say, governments targeting some entities using this directive. I would say that this directive establishes a clear baseline for lobbying activity sponsored by third countries in every country. And the fact that we will have this interface from which everyone in Europe can have a window and look into an entity which is registered in another, in one member state. It gives more visibility to the activity of NGOs or, let's say, possible entities which might be, as you said, targeted. So if everyone sees it, I think this is the best protection for legitimate work of NGOs. This is one thing. Secondly, if someone abused the power in the government to try to target specific organizations, this happens anyway today in the absence of this directive. So I would say the directive will bring more clarity and will define the expectations the public has in regard of the work of such an organization which is financed by third country government. So I would say it improves the situation. It does not worsen the situation.
Thank you. Do you have some more questions in the room? And online, I don't see any raised hands. Do we want to have some closing remarks, perhaps?
I was mentioning earlier that for me this exercise, which was a difficult one because we started with a complicated text, but we end up with something which, in my opinion and those who supporting it, it makes sense. I said earlier that transparency exercise, it's not something ideological. We all should go behind a proposal which brings more transparency into our society. We know that 8 among 10 citizens in Europe are worried about foreign influence in policy making in Europe. So this is a small instrument to answer these worries, saying, okay, now you can look and see who represents whom in terms of policy influencing. It's a first step. The whole directive does not intend to punish illegal influence. This is for other institutions, organizations at the national level, member states, to deal with. But the only thing this directive does is to create these registers. Everyone can see who is paid by whom when trying to influence one policy in our union. So this is it. I hope that will be successful, and then, of course, we will start working with the Council for a trialogue, and then we'll have a final product. As I mentioned earlier, I spoke with lots of member states representatives. Something I didn't mention is that this is being a minimum harmonization. It means there are systems in place which are working very well. We are not asking them to change anything, so they can keep the way they are doing business in their country, because there are countries with very strong registered requirements for these lobbying activities. And to give you just an example, France, which has a specific authority, national authority, independent, which looks into registration of lobbying activities, and there even the sanctions are tougher than we are proposing, but they can keep their system because the system works. So, but in countries like mine, Romania, where is not such a register, does not exist, now is going to exist, and people will see who is lobbying in the interest of what foreign country. So I do believe that we'll have in the end a small step forward in increasing the transparency of lobbying activity in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We can close the press conference. Bye. Have a good day.